Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Kessner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and our guests for today. Hi, everybody. This is Katie Kessner, and you are listening to the Dear Katie podcast. Thank you so much for continuing this healing journey. Each and every episode features someone or some folks out there who have made a difference or are taking this journey with you. We are so excited to have two fantastic trauma-informed attorneys with us today who are members of the National Sexual Assault Legal Team for Take Back the Night. So I'm just going to share a little bit about each one, and then they're going to roll with a few ideas about what kind of cases they've had, maybe share one or two that have really been a meaningful experience for them personally. And then we're also going to talk about the landscape of where we are in victim advocacy in the legal department toward the end of our conversation today. So first and foremost, we have Helene. Helene Weiss is a partner at the Marsh Law Firm and works to protect the rights of survivors of abuse. Helene works on a wide range of cases representing survivors of sexual abuse. She is a former Special Victims Bureau Prosecutor who has tried dozens of cases from jury selection to verdict, both criminal and civil. Helene also works as an Adjunct Professor of Law at Hofstra University, which is in New York City general area, in case anyone did not know, teaching advanced trial skills. She is a woman wearing many hats. And our other guest today is Grant Boyd, and Grant is an attorney from St. Louis, Missouri. His practice focuses on representing sexual abuse survivors and families of victims. In just 10 years as an attorney, Grant has won over $500 million for crime victims and also assists victims for free in navigating criminal cases, such as the work we do together at Take Back the Night. Welcome, both of you. This is so exciting to get two gurus from middle of the country, New York State. So welcome to both of you. And I'd kind of asked each of you to share one case or, maybe something about your work that really inspired you, maybe in the last recent time, or maybe it was the one that got you started and hooked on advocating for victims of sexual violence. Helene, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit? And I assume did you go to Hofstra as well?
Yeah, I did. I went to Hofstra. Thank you so much for having me, Katie and Grant. It's great to see you again. We're really excited to be here. So yeah, I went to Hofstra Law School, and now I'm back teaching and helping our mock trial students with their advanced advocacy skills. And I'd be happy to share a representative case with you. It's tough because so many come to mind, and I did work in the criminal sector before moving to civil. So those criminal cases, as a Special Victims Bureau Prosecutor, you're really dealing with trauma that is so fresh. Someone who's just been through a really probably the most difficult experience of their entire life within the last 6, 12, 24 hours after I meet them.
Oh, wow.
So that trauma is really fresh. Now in the civil sector, I'm dealing with survivors who have had more time to kind of soak in the effects of that trauma. So I'm seeing a lot of different kinds of stories now than I used to see. Very, very similar, but I think what I get out of the survivors is a little different. It's very interesting to have both the criminal and civil context here. But in the civil sector, one of the standout cases to me was a Title IX case that I worked on a year or two ago with a young lady who was unfortunately a victim the very first week of college, her freshman year. She was barely 18 years old, and she was attacked by an upperclassman at a party. She was incapacitated completely, and this individual was not incapacitated at all. He was very decidedly sober. And it came out through witness testimony and through the hearing that this was likely not the first time he had done a targeted attack like this on a freshman. And thankfully, throughout the hearing process, it really inspired me to have so much hope in this new generation, these new Gen Zs that are, coming in, and they're college kids now. And a lot of them are so trauma informed. We had witnesses that really made our client's case. We had two young gentlemen. They were only 18 years old. They barely knew my client. They had met her 3 days before. It's the first week of college, so they really don't know each other. But they saw her stumbling back to a dorm room with this older man who was clearly not stumbling, and they knew that they should probably do something. They knew the situation didn't seem right. And instead of just, saying it's not our problem to deal with, they actually spoke up and said, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need..."
Wow.
Right, exactly. You don't.
That's so awesome. Hooray for the hope. I hear you on hope. That's so exciting.
It was insane to me, because bystander intervention is such a real thing, with people not having that bystander intervention effect. Oh, someone else will take care of this, right? And so you just don't get to see that a lot, especially with young folks, where you're in a vulnerable position. You feel kind of scared to speak out when you're so young and you don't have that much life experience sometimes. And these young men really thought, we need to do something. They did speak up. They ultimately decided it really wasn't their place to kind of rip the two apart, but they went back to her dorm room the very next day because they felt like they needed to do more and make sure she was okay. And it was at that point she was kind of accepting what had just happened to her the night before. And when I became involved in her case, just a few days, weeks later, those two gentlemen that she remembered, she said, "I think you're going to want to talk to them. I think they saw something. I think they're going to be helpful." They were phenomenal. They really helped me lay the foundation about their observations on her intoxication. And ultimately, through a lot of other evidence that is just so overwhelming in quantity and quality to talk about, this individual was ultimately expelled permanently from the university for what he did to my client. Thankfully, we don't see that a lot in the Title IX world. It is very difficult to get rid of someone, especially a junior college athlete who represented this university in several different, really big ticket sporting events. And so it was a real moment of justice, a true moment of justice when that happened. And it felt great to be her attorney, and it felt great to tell her parents and tell her. And it's a victory that I'll never forget, because it was really meaningful.
Absolutely. Helene, thank you for sharing that. My quick question would be, did the university or college do its own internal investigation and have a hearing in addition to your civil case?
So that was exactly what it was. I represented her in the college,
in the campus.
Exactly.
Hearing.
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
There was a subsequent civil suit that occurred, or I'll say there was a civil mediation that occurred afterwards that was amicably resolved. But
did you help with that too?
Because it was a different state than I'm barred in, I had to refer her out to a lawyer who I trust very much to handle that specific portion of this. But I counseled on it, I consulted on it, and a lot of the evidence that was used in our investigation was obviously used in this mediation. But the initial actual hearing that I was describing in detail, that was the university's internal investigation. A lot of the evidence provided from my client or gathered through our own investigatory process. But I will say the university did a great job at taking this case seriously. I think they realized how serious it was. That doesn't always happen with universities. Right. You get a lot of this. They want to brush it under the rug. And that wasn't the case here, thankfully. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What a hero for you to be to her as well. Yeah. And I like that you helped with the family.
Yeah. My client's really the hero here. She was phenomenal. She's one of the bravest people I've ever met in my life. She was sharp. She was a quick thinker. She listened to my advice. She advocated for herself. And so really all the credit is hers.
Awesome. Do you know, my last final one for you, and then we'll hear from Grant. Do you happen to know, like, my other curiosity is, since I do all this public speaking all my life to try and train and educate too, do you know if she had any sort of, like, they probably had an orientation program. Do you think that was something that helped her being willing to come forward?
Yeah.
And maybe the two guys had bystander training at orientation?
So that was actually something that did come up in my conversations with some of these, young folks. They did just have one of these orientation meetings. They had a Title IX packet that was, on their desk given to them. This is what you do. This is how reporting works. So I do think it was fresh in their minds because of the nature of exactly when this occurred. So fresh in the year, those sort of orientations are happening. It was also a college, a university where these students are very bright. It was a really great university in our country. And so you're dealing with a lot of really sharp young folks here. And just because someone's sharp, though, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be trauma informed. So I was just delighted to have met so many different young people throughout this process that understood how serious this was and how important that their truth was. I guess that was really just an amazing takeaway that, we've all got, there's problems in our country. Survivors are, notoriously an underrepresented group, a vulnerable group. But I think that there is more awareness being brought to sexual violence in general, the prevalence of sexual violence in universities, at schools, in medical institutions, foster homes, all over the place. And that case really opened my eyes and made me realize that, there's hope. There is hope that these younger generations are being informed and taking those personal steps to try to be better people for the community that they're in around themselves. And that's just so important.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Helene. That was really inspiring. A great way to start. Grant, not that there's a competition here. That was pretty tough to beat. But what was some of your...
It's tough to compete with Helene. She's quite the rock star in this field and whatnot. And I had the pleasure of presenting with her at a conference previously and hearing about her work and experience. So, I got into this, kind of fell backwards into this advocacy, not really realizing that that was where my passion lied. And I kind of found it by chance, where I was, I guess, ironically enough, working at a criminal defense firm here in Missouri, which is one of probably the top outfits in the state and for the field we were in, probably in the country. And we weren't doing, or at least I wasn't doing, any sex cases. The guy I worked for, he specialized in DWIs and repeat offenders where they're looking at prison time. But I had some really good mentors in law school that were trying to kind of steer me towards representing victims or people that have been harmed and injured, and pushing on me and kind of taught me just enough to get myself in trouble as a young lawyer. And, at that firm that I was at, which had been historically a criminal defense outfit, we would have people come in looking for a civil attorney, and they would just turn them away and just say, "Hey, sorry, we can't help you." And so eventually, after I got my license, I kind of just raised my hand in the back of the room in my boss's office. I'm like, "Hey, I can help these people." And it was a family that had lost a loved one in an alcohol-related incident. So we did that case. And it worked out well. And then a different part of the family came forward and said, "Hey, we didn't want to bother you while this other case was going on. We kind of wanted to see how you did. But, our daughter is 12 now, but when she was 8, she was raped at an in-home daycare that she stayed at once because she spent the night at her best friend's house. And, we've been through 4 other law firms. They all told us there's nothing we can do. There's no insurance coverage. There's no route to get her any kind of compensation. We just have to live with the fact that the perpetrator's in prison and get over it." And so I said, kind of my take on it was, "Hey, if we can get you, we'll fight for you. If we get you a judgment, it'll be yours to collect on. We won't take anything or take a fee. And, but I think that that's the right thing to do. But, ideally we get some kind of compensation for your daughter without putting her through, strenuous litigation, and protecting her from any kind of further re-traumatization." And then once I got into it and read the police reports and the therapy notes, it just totally messed me up. And in a lot of ways, like looking back, it was in a really good way, but it caused, that ability to sympathize and empathize with victims and their families that I didn't have really that experience before in the type of work I do, where you're getting to see that peek behind the curtain as to what kind of harm and the ways it permeates people's lives that you don't think about when you're in a situation like that, whether you're on the defense side or the prosecution side. And it totally kind of caused a schism within me where I could no longer do criminal defense, and just really fell in love with victim advocacy. And once I read the police report and therapy notes, it was just kind of, and looked at what the insurance company was doing, like, this just can't be right. Like, there has to be a way to fix this for this little girl. There has to be a way. And I just obsessed over it. And, it was one of those things where I couldn't sleep because of all the imagery, like just having to imagine what this girl went through and reading what she was going through in therapy. And so I'd, sleep for like an hour and wake up and jump on my computer and start researching and trying to find ways around what the insurance company was saying, as to why that they weren't going to provide coverage for this girl's claim against the daycare. And it was a bit of a weird situation, because all of a sudden we have this big firm in the state that represents, that insurance companies hire, that is kind of a buzzsaw firm. And I get a random call on my cell phone one day from the named partner of the firm. And I think I'd been a lawyer all of like a year maybe. And so I kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome, where all of a sudden I'm like, oh God, I got caught on my heels a little bit. I got this attorney calling me, about to put the gears to me. And I need to make sure I sound like I know what I'm doing here. And so
you're very honest, Grant. I love it. It sounds like trial by fire. You're living through it.
I know. Yeah. So it is like, and I think sometimes this industry can kind of cause you to get in your own head a little bit. And so I'm like, oh my God, I need to, like, it's game time. And it's time to like really, like, all this energy, all this work we put in, like, put on the suit and let's go. And so we just refused to take no for an answer. And it just kind of allowed me, I found that I was able to be my genuine self as an attorney versus playing the character of a righteous advocate, which, looking back on it, when I was a criminal defense attorney, I was like playing this character. It wasn't necessarily like the real me. But when I was advocating for this girl that had been sexually abused, I felt like I was speaking like truly me. And so next thing you know, we got her a settlement for over $1 million. And it was all like seeing her reaction, her family's reaction. She didn't even know what was going on. We were able to insulate her from the process so much to protect her. And the family's reaction. Then her best friend, it turns out, was repeatedly molested by the same perpetrator at the same daycare. And so that family came forward and said, hey, is there any chance you could help? And we were able to achieve the exact same result for her. And then they made me this little bracelet that said fearless on it. And so, and so it kind of became a little bit of a motto that I started to kind of let guide my practice, and really stuck with me and showed me that, like, this is what I want to do. And I'm lucky that it's my career, but I'm passionate about it and I can be my genuine self. And then the rest of it has just kind of taken off from there, to where now it's, I left that firm 5 years ago to pursue this as a passion project, because I just couldn't do the criminal defense anymore. Those two cases really messed me up in a way that shoved me into what I'm doing now, which, blessing in disguise. But
well, good thing though, Grant. Now you're doing exactly what you were meant to do. I
know. So it actually worked out well, but it was tough at the time because, like, the guy I was working for was like, hey, I thought you were going to kind of be the one who took the firm over, be the kind of next guy. And so when I had really, in law school, I was like, when my mentors tried to push me towards this kind of work, I'm like, nah, I'm criminal defense until I retire. And I thought I truly believed that. And then when this happened, I'm like, oh my God, I'm about to, there wasn't really a lot of this going on in Missouri where there was an attorney that focused on just victim advocacy. And so I'm like, I'm about to take a giant leap of faith here, and who knows where the hell this is going to go. And It has been, as Helene will tell you, and Katie, I know it's emotional, it's taxing, but there's no better feeling than having like the experiences like Helene had, like those, when you get to tell those families and those girls like that you've changed the course of things for the better finally. And that's, really the big part of it that people don't talk about enough. And I think that true advocates in this field, like that's really the part that we kind of get the high from, if you will, is that feeling of like, we're here to reshape this for the better because you got dealt a terrible hand that no one should have. And now we're going to fix this as much as we can.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, Grant, because that's, that definitely propels me for all my life since age 18. I was barely 18 too, Helene, when I was on the cover of Time magazine. So, as, a victim of what they call date rape. And I just would go back to a couple points you made, Grant. One is it's fascinating to thinking about your mindset too, and being on, both of you took two turns in life, right? Both of you did criminal and then you went over and did civil. So it helps you know the full 360 picture of legal lanes. And, you kind of touched, Helene, on the school lane. So just for the sake of our listeners, we're talking about criminal, which means jail and, penalties that go on your criminal record for any offense that's found to be a criminal level offense. In each and every state, it's a little different. Like where Grant is in Missouri has different laws and policies around sexual abuse and misconduct than Helene does in New York. But then there's the civil avenue, which I want to explain a little better to our listeners because that's what the legal hotline specializes in. And then, Helene, you also did this Title IX work within the educational world, which is kind of, I always say the 3 C's, like criminal, campus, and civil. And here's another thing I always teach because you all speak so much. When I'm doing educational training for any number of entities, I always say which one expires the quickest, usually the civil, although lately, Helene, you could speak to like New York extending the civil timeline for lots of child abuse, especially survivors, and other places, but usually 2, maybe 3 or 4 years. And criminal is usually 5 to 8. But again, child abuse sometimes a little longer. And the campus system is usually available to someone as long as the alleged offender is a member of that institution or tied to it in some way. So that's the easy summary I can do as the non-lawyer in the little call here.
Pretty spot on, Katie. It's not pretty accurate.
Yeah. But I think it might be helpful, like if you two want to illuminate any other thing that you think our listeners would be helped in knowing about, like how to access each one. I know we're going kind of rudimentary for a minute, but how did they find each of you? Like Grant, how did the little girl and her family find you? They were in the criminal law. Why did we do the criminal place?
Yeah.
Why did they walk through the door there?
It's one of these, I'm not a big advertiser and neither was the firm I was at. It was really like a by chance thing where this family kind of, I was very fortunate that the guy I was working for and that was mentoring me, and he's still a mentor of mine, that he, as far as trial skills, kind of looked at as like the badass, sorry for my language, of Missouri, where it's just like, he's the guy. And, we probably tried 60 to 100 cases together.
Whoa.
Wow. And it's a
because you're not that old. Like that sounds like, how did you do it? That was like in 4 years?
So I interned for him for like, I think he hired me the second week of law school. I showed up. I had been interning in like public defender. The university I was at for undergrad placed me at a public defender's office for an internship. And back then I thought I was going to be a prosecutor. I'm like, I don't want to do this. And so I was there and I kind of just fell in love with it. I think a little bit of it was for the cause type stuff where it's, these people probably haven't had anyone fight for them and just need help getting guided through the system. But that work, I guess, put me on his radar. He came to law school, hired me. And then I was attached to his hip basically. And I was just really kind of like just really soaking up everything we were doing. And I was going to all of his trials with him, helping him prep for all his trials for the overwhelming majority. And we were jury trying cases probably once or twice a month, which is just insane. And Helene, will probably tell you the same thing, that in her work as a prosecutor, they try a lot of cases. And the one thing I do wish that I had was Helene's experience on the building a case side, because that's so different than being on the defense side in the criminal world, where you're just beating up on something that someone else already made, as opposed to starting from the ground up and building it and, putting the narrative out there. So this family came in for that wrongful death case because they had heard about this, big bad trial lawyer, which was my old boss, Travis Noble. And he did that. He's like, "Hey, sorry, this isn't what I do." And I raised my hand. I'm like, "Hey, I can do this." And he's like, "Just do not, for the love of God, do not cost me any money." And so just because the firm had no idea how it operated, other than we're taking a flyer on a case. And then it just by chance, kind of a separate part of that family through that connection, after seeing what we did on the wrongful death case, came forward. And that seems to be kind of how, like, I'm not a big believer in like, "Hey, I'm going to throw my face on a billboard or in a TV ad and tell you what a great victim advocate." It's kind of like, if you need me, you know how to find me, like, and people will help you find me. And so in a weird way, that experience in the criminal defense system and in the criminal law world helped me get connected with law enforcement officers, victim advocates, prosecutors, to where they kind of learned what I was about a bit as I was starting to lean more towards into victim advocacy. And so that helps, and you get to know lawyers and whatnot. But I don't know that, and Helene may have a better idea, because I'm terrible at tracking this stuff, where like, how do these people stumble on us? But it's a great question. And I'm still trying to figure it out, but it's a lot of word of mouth type stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's, like what we're doing today is more educational. It's not like Lundy Law, like
Right.
You see all these crazy billboards and all their slogans. And it just makes my skin crawl, because it feels really like a circus. It doesn't feel very human and very real. And when is the clown going to show up? When's the juggling starting? I get that feeling about, and both of you come across like ideal. Like I wish every single survivor who listens to this and passes it along and share this podcast with your friends. My gosh, these are the amazing people you want. Don't go with the flashy gold brass things everywhere. You want people who care and who, like Grant said, you stayed up all night. My gosh, I also thought we could talk about that too. It's like, we're doing this really deep dive into not a movie. This is not like a script. This is real life and real lives and real pain and real tears and no acting. So I'm really glad that you can bring the humanity back in. There's so many documentaries, I think, and movies that fall short on trying to depict this issue. There's not many that I've seen that really do it well. And so even your, brief discussion today, both of you were better than a movie to me. Like, it was so real and I didn't even tell you we were going to talk about this stuff.
Well,
and look at you, stuff you're just
about. That's the great stuff. It's tough to talk about the real survivor stories, because that's the stuff that really changes your life if you actually care about this work and you're doing it for the right reasons. It's not easy to talk about, but it's fun to remember it. And as I'm remembering it, I get emotional about it, because it really, and I'm sure it changed Grant's life too. Those sort of big cases that you remember, and it's really the clients you remember. You remember the clients, you remember their bravery, their families, what they went through. And you're right, Katie, it's not always the flashy lawyer with the billboard. That is the one that might be the justice-oriented one. What I tell survivors, and when I do educational things and they're like, how do I find the right firm for me? How do I find the right fit for me? I don't know what I'm looking for. I tell them, look for a firm that is focused on being trauma informed and focused on survivor focused, right? Because of course you want to be results oriented. You want to get them the right results, but you're also holding their hand through this entire process and helping them get through the trauma that they're living and doing it in a way that does not re-traumatize them too much, because they're going to be re-traumatized in different ways throughout the process. It's part of the process. And so part of your job as their attorney, their advocate, their representative is to help minimize that traumatization process as much as you can. And so I think that's so important for survivors when they're trying to look for an advocate for themselves.
Helene, I was listening to you and I'm always, my brain's always going so many things. So what I just thought of, you guys, was the trauma part of, yes, the trauma is going to come up for each survivor who does this. But when we sometimes on the show have talked with therapists and they talk about reprogramming those triggers, like the smell or the movie that loops in your head of the particular scene. And I'm actually thinking, and you two might do this already, but if I were you and my job was to do the lawyer, I would try and actually create the process of working through the case with all the ways to reprogram. Like this is lemon water, like lemon, like certain tastes can help to reprogram. Like when they're talking about a really hard thing, if they have like a lemon candy, it might help them stay calmer. I really believe in all this like interesting research that's coming out about
Totally.
how you can do therapy and do reprogramming all the like worst parts. So what I was thinking, even you two as attorneys, when you're sitting there and you could be at the ready with like some of these smells or tastes to start to like, and what they can hold on to, sometimes it's like the touch too, like, or a temperature, like having them have ice. Like I was reading about one of our guests said something about like if they get really upset, do the cold floor and the ice on their feet. So I'm just thinking like that would be cool.
Yeah,
maybe
that's a great idea. That's a great idea because sensory memories are so powerful, especially when we're talking about traumatic events and traumatic recall. And you can attach so many really visceral and important sensory experiences: the smell of alcohol in someone's breath, the song that was playing in the background, the color of the rug that's in the corner. These small things that you might not think matter at the time, but become very essential when I'm asking that client to recall something, and it becomes such a powerful part. So I use sensory tools and sensory questions when I'm trying to jog a client's memory, about an event that happened. I mean, it's important for them because they're not always going to remember. Memories are not sequential. They're not like a movie playing in your head. They're triggered by all of those sensory things that you were just talking about. So that's really important. And as far as helping survivors when they're going through a difficult process, one really cool thing, Katie, I think you would enjoy this, and Grant, you would have loved to use this with your daycare client, is we have these care kits that we give our child victims if they're going through like a deposition. Yeah, like a little, like if they're doing a deposition or a hearing, or they have to be on in court or somewhere else, and it's a scary experience for them. We put together this little kit, and it's got Brave box, right? And they've got like a squishy they can hold on to, and they've got things that they can let their stress out, and they can write about their feelings in a little journal we give them. And we even have a firm dog. His name is Apollo, and he will escort our clients to depositions if he needs to. So there are a lot of ways to make your client.
I like then yeah. Grant, you need the fearless box.
I know. I was about to say, I'm about to steal one of those ideas.
Use your logo, your moniker up there. Yeah. It's the fearless box. What was yours again, Helene? What was your box? It's
a care box, and it's also
you labeled it
a Brave box. You can put a Brave box. Make them feel empowered.
I like fearless and brave boxes. Yeah. It'll be trending. We'll start making them to raise money at Take Back the Night. Go for it. That's such a great idea, and I love the therapy dog too. Yeah, like the legal eagle dog.
Yeah, exactly. Well, special victims bureaus do it all the time. They have dogs that stay in the bureau. I had one that was Mega. She was in the bureau 24/7. She was my bureau chief's dog that went through training, and she was always there in the office for the children. And I worked at some other civil firms before joining Marsh Law Firm, and this is the first firm that is so close to being like a Special Victims Bureau, because they're like, oh yeah, we have a trauma dog. I'm like, wow, cool. So you guys actually care. It does make a difference for just these little things, and our clients they really appreciate it. So yeah,
I'm certain this is so exciting. I think our listeners probably didn't know all this was possible. You're both very inspiring.
I think I need to fire off an email to our partners demanding a firm dog.
Go ahead, Grant. You should, because you know what? It's good. Yeah. It's good for morale, and it's great for the clients.
I'm all about especially like the prosecutors' offices, the child advocacy centers that have like those victim units that have those trauma dogs.
Yeah.
It does wonders.
Yeah. And then we could get Fresh Pet to sponsor and like be part of the advocacy team.
And it's not just for kids too. We have a lot of adults that find it really, really comforting just to have that comfort animal, that something there that makes them feel like it's going to be okay. And animals really do know. Anyone who's had a good dog or a great cat, animals just get it. So it's great.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's talk about in the last little part here. I mean, we can come back to a few more topics, but I think what's been headlining a lot lately in the last few months is this kind of outing of Jane Does and John Does. And let's talk about what that means, since our listeners may not know exactly the history of why there was a Jane Doe ever. Where did that even come from? And then what's this tactic that the other side is using? Grant, do you want to take a go at that? Or
yeah, sure. So essentially, like the concept of proceeding, whether any party proceeding with a pseudonym such as Jane Doe or John Doe, it's to preserve the identity or prevent the public disclosure of the identity of that party because of some specific reason, such as sensitive information, privacy laws, or just a general concept of this. Because of the nature of this matter, this person their identity shouldn't be publicly disclosed. Everyone who's a part of the process, the litigants there's ways and methods that they can all determine who the identity of each party without it being public. But it makes sure that people, when they are in those sensitive, private, incredibly personal situations, that they aren't deterred from participating in the system because they don't want their closest, deepest, most sensitive information out there for the public to see, especially in an era that we have now where we can pull court records from across the country, from any federal jurisdiction. I can pull almost every single court filing from that case because of the PACER system. So when you have that, it's not like the days where you have to go up to the courthouse and, go find a dusty old scroll and find the case file. It's like that. You can find someone, there's databases where you just run someone's name and it'll show you everything they've been involved in and where you can pull all the documents from. So the idea is that if you find yourself in a situation like this, that you don't have to worry about all your business being put out there against your will. There's a procedure that you can go through and a protocol to where you can protect yourself from just another potential re-traumatization.
Nice. Okay. So that makes sense. Helene, do you want to add or?
Sure. So Jane Doe, John Doe terminology, we use it now in the civil sector in the context of lawsuits, in the context of using an anonymous name or a pseudonym in lawsuits to cover the identity of a victim or survivor who does not want their identity known. It originated way back in the 13th century when we were using it as a medical placeholder for people whose identities were unknown. So that's the very common one you can think of. Take yourself out of the legal context, and a body is found and they don't have the identification. John Doe, Jane Doe, simple names that were just used as medical placeholders dating back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it eventually came into the legal context. When there needed to be placeholder names in, land deeds or other identifying factors where we need to know the name of someone, but we don't have a name. They use these placeholders, Jane Doe, John Doe. So, but now we can use them, like Grant said, in the civil context. When someone's name is known, we know their name as their attorney representative, but this person doesn't want the public knowing who they are. They don't want everyone knowing that they were the victim of this specific crime by this specific defendant. And there are certain legal protections, much more protections for children survivors than there are for adult survivors, unfortunately. State to state laws vary on what's allowed in anonymity proceedings, in pseudonym proceedings by use of Jane Doe or John Doe, or any other pseudonym at all. You can make up a name. In New York, I have a client who's proceeding by a totally made up nickname. She prefers it, and the judge granted it, even though it was a strange request. It meant something to her, and so the judge is letting us use this name. That's not her real name and is not a Jane Doe, but it's a pseudonym. So it can be used. It's tricky because our laws are messy. The United States is messy because it's a good thing. States have rights, but there's also federal rights. And what that means, though, is every single state has a different rule on how you can proceed anonymously in a lawsuit. And there's also different federal requirements when you're in federal court. And even in that state level that I just spoke about, you have different counties within a state that will disagree on how they want to proceed, at least in New York. And then you have different judges within that specific county that might disagree with a judge that sits in the same county as them. And sometimes it comes down to political affiliation. And right now we're seeing a big movement in some of these really big public lawsuits. P. Diddy, Jay-Z, come to mind pretty immediately because those ones are so fresh, where you have a survivor who is coming forward with allegations, of course. Right now, they're allegations until proven. However, this person fears that their identity is going to be leaked, right? Because these are very powerful people, some of the most powerful people you can imagine, with a lot of money and a lot of resources, much more than the survivors have, enough resources to destroy them, their lives, their livelihood. And so it's very understandable why someone would want to proceed anonymously and want that protection. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is some judges are saying, well, you don't have the right to be anonymous because you're filing a suit and you're accusing someone of something very serious. And because of that, you have to be willing to forego the privacy protections that used to be afforded to survivors in this context and are still afforded in some contexts by some judges. We're just seeing a big split right now, a big disagreement in the courts on whether or not this sort of privacy protection should be in place, what circumstances justify it being in place. And in my experience, children are granted this protection much more readily than adults are. Even people who are now adults but were abused as children in the allegations, much more readily than adults. And unfortunately, it's like the minute that person turns 18, in a lot of states, in a lot of jurisdictions, courts just don't think that you should be granted the same privacy protection as some of those child abusers. And it's a big issue right now for survivors and for advocates who are trying to fight this issue. So that's sort of what we've all been working on right now, is some of these big landmark cases that are coming out. How do we deal with this? How do we convince the courts that this really does matter?
Yeah, it's such a fascinating issue, and you explain it so well, Helene. I think the resonance I have with the issue is I outed my own darn self. Like I was 18 and they didn't print my name in all the newspapers. People might not know this, but back when I called the local newspaper after I'd had my hearing, and he was found responsible, and his punishment was not to go in my residence hall for one semester and to get back together in the spring. That was the punishment from the dean back then. And so I wrote to the local newspaper and I'm like, this is crazy. And I think I titled it Educating a Rapist at the state. It was state William and Mary. So I was like, state funds used to educate a rapist. And I don't know. I was 18. I wrote one. Yeah. But they took it and they published it without my name. So I wrote back and I said, why not? And I autographed I'm like, you have the right to use my name. I'm a legal adult now. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed. And here's another fun fact, you guys. I bet you didn't know this. back when I was on the television shows, I don't know that I've seen this happen, but they put him, when he would get interviewed, they did that thing where he was all in shadow and looked like a, so I was always on camera like this, and he was always like Mr. Monster, like with it. And they did the voice modulation, but back then it was so bad. Oh yeah, it was like, he sounded like a robot.
Well, you bring up an important point though, Katie, and that's that if a survivor wants to say, you know what, I want to tell the world that this happened to me. I want to take a stand for whatever reason.
That was just in France.
Yeah, exactly.
Remember?
Oh my God. I mean, I can't even say enough about that woman and her courage, but if someone wants to, have the bravery, have the courage, not that you're not courageous if you don't want your name plastered everywhere, but for survivors who do feel this sort of sense of courageousness by saying, you know what, I don't need a pseudonym here. You have the right. You certainly have the right to proceed by your legal name. And that's not something to be embarrassed of. And that's not something to apologize for. It's actually something I commend my clients when they are willing to do that, because you know what? It tells the defendants that you aren't scared and that they have less leverage against you and that this isn't someone who can be bullied. And sometimes it can be an incredibly powerful route to take. And if we have a survivor that's on the fence, I don't want to push anyone to do anything they're uncomfortable with. But I've had a couple people that after sitting with it for a while have decided to take that leap of faith and are eventually so proud they did, because they've found that they can take some of their own power back and give themselves a voice and really feel like they are part of the process and that they're stripping away the feelings of shame and guilt that become attached with feeling like you're in the shadows sometimes. Again, not to take away from anyone who feels like they want that protection, but it really can be an incredibly empowering experience to attach your name to what happened to you and say, I'm not afraid. This isn't something I should feel ashamed about. You should feel ashamed for doing this to me.
Yeah. Thanks, Helene. Well, I know we're almost out, but Grant, do you want to share anything else? I mean, Helene is obviously part of the show.
No,
sorry.
I do think, I think the trend we're starting to see, or that it's continuing at least, is that people are understanding that these experiences of abuse they're not on an island. Like, there is a lot of people have experienced that, and there's no need to be ashamed. And there's it's such a common feeling. It's so innate, and people really don't have a good grasp of the impact of being abused or being the victim of a crime, especially a victim of a violent crime like sexual abuse or domestic violence, on how it can just really mess with everything and mess with you mentally. And you go through the things like Helene said, like the shame, the guilt, the self-blame, like, oh my God, what are people going to think differently if they find out that I was abused? Or, and in my opinion, what we're seeing as the most, new offensive tactic from alleged abusers is, we're going to try to force you to publicly identify yourself as that's the sword that they want to wield, thinking that that's going to beat these things back. But what I'm hopeful for is that we continue to reshape this idea of being a survivor of these things is not a scarlet letter. It is, you're here to fight. And we're here to fight for you. You got an entire, more people than you realize around you share your experience, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. That's, in a way, that is it. Let it shape you and let it create you into the thing that's going to push back. And whether you do that as Jane Doe, John Doe, or some nickname or initials or your name, this is your fight. It's your power. These tactics we're seeing under the guise of, well, the public court system should be open to the public. And it's all BS, in my opinion. It's a BS defense tactic because they don't need it to be publicly disclosed. It's just a hope that you back down. And the more that we all speak out and help people understand that they're not on that island that I was talking about, that there's a bunch of people that not only share their experience, but support them. And I think once you start telling people that, hey, I'm a survivor of an incident like this, that takes a lot of courage to do that. But you realize very quickly that all those fears and those worries that you had about doing that and what people would think, they all get they'll go away very fast because no one thinks less of you. No one gives a shit. They're like, oh, what? Now we're not going to be friends with, Helene or Grant or Katie or, Bob because he got abused. Like, that's total bullshit. So people want to help. People want to be supportive, and people want to be there for you. Like, it's kind of like, this is way downplay analogy, but it's almost like when you look in the mirror and you got this big pimple on your face that you think, and it's all you can look. You're like, oh my God, people are going to think I'm so ugly. And the only person who knows about it or cares about it is you. So, and that's a really dumbed down thing. And I hope that, I don't intend to make light of being a survivor by using that analogy, but it's somewhat of the same mentality. And the more we can get, like I said, this idea of like, we're all here together. And whether you're the advocate, you're a survivor also, or you're just part of the team, or you're just part of the community that supports and helps people, that like, be ready to rock and roll, whether it's Jane Doe, John Doe, or your name. And people are going to be there to support you, even if you're against your will, you're forced to publicly identify yourself. And it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Thanks, Grant. And thanks, Helene. What an amazing interview and discussion we've had. Both of you, you're still at the beginning of your career, so I'm not even worried how far, like you said, 60 or 100, Grant. Now, when I talk to you next time, it's going to be, I've done 1,000 of these cases.
Yeah, we'll see. But
Let's try. I mean, you can't clone yourselves, but you two are doing awesome work. So empowering. You made me feel hopeful just with the stories you shared, and you two being your really committed, caring selves. And I know you've heartened everyone listening. So I want to close out with, our listeners, please really find hope. Be fearless, be brave, find hope, using the words that stuck with me today. You are not alone, and the Sexual Assault Legal Support Hotline is totally free. You can just start to learn about your options right then there. You can either make the phone call or fill out the form. And our legal team, of whom you're looking at 2 of them, and they are really fantastic. And if they're, don't settle for anything less than the gold standard you heard today. So, just know there are amazing people out there. And if they can't particularly help you, I bet they have a friend or colleague who absolutely can, like Helene mentioned, with referrals. So that said, continue to take the healing journey together. We are definitely stronger, and we will also thrive and survive. Take care. Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.